I've been through some intense seasons of loneliness throughout my life, both in my 20s and in my 30s. I want to share some stories and some lessons that hopefully you'll find useful. These are some things that pulled me out of that loneliness. This isn't going to be a video of me just complaining. I know you can find a lot of those online. This is me actually just wanting to offer some solutions that genuinely helped me. We're going to go deep here, probably deeper than you're expecting, but stick with me. Ultimately, I've learned that victimhood will pretty much never serve you and get you the results that you want. I spent plenty of time in my 20s and the first part of my 30s just feeling sorry for myself. All it did was perpetuate the feeling of emptiness that I had at the time. But loneliness can actually serve you if you let it, and that's what I want to talk to you about. The first point is I needed to learn how to be alone, at least for a season. Now, in the long term, I know that human beings are not meant to be alone forever. There's a reason that humans have always been a part of tribes, and there's something to be said about that. But I've found that seasons of loneliness can be a massive gift to grow, to heal, and build yourself. But oftentimes it's easy to fall into the trap of wasting time and numbing yourself. Loneliness is uncomfortable. It can be downright painful. It's very easy to spend 4 hours of your evening playing video games, watching porn, obsessing over sports in order to kill time and numb yourself. Vices were like morphine for a gaping wound inside of myself that I didn't want to address. Whether childhood trauma, grief from a previous loss. Other people can be vices too. Low quality friends or people that you date can be a great distraction from whatever's going on internally. The thing that I noticed is that you tend to attract the friends, the romantic partner who are most similar to where you're at. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because I wasn't in the healthiest place, those were the types of people that I was attracting. Those were my friends. That was my romantic partner. I could sit here, I could play the victim, I could blame other people. But at the end of the day, it's what I attracted into my own life. I chose to move things forward in those friendships, in those relationships, in spite of any red flags, because I wasn't okay with being alone. Felt like I needed to escape that feeling. Until that feeling is addressed, dealt with, and healed, even if you get to a point where physically you're not alone anymore, you will still feel a sense of loneliness. And in my opinion, that's even worse, especially if it's in a romantic relationship. That's what I had in my marriage. The fear of remaining lonely is what caused me to get married when I didn't feel ready. Being raised in a religious home, looking around at my peers, seeing everybody get married, it just seemed like the right thing to do. Essentially, I was just going along with the crowd out of fear. I wasn't okay with just being with myself, and that's also why I had a toxic circle of friends in my 20s. Now, if I would have embraced just being alone and would have used that time to address all the things going on inside of me, that feeling of incompleteness, of feeling small, there are a lot of mistakes that I would have avoided. What I would tell my younger self if I could, viewing loneliness as a bad thing is a trap. Is it uncomfortable? Is it painful? Absolutely. Like so is surgery, or rather the healing process after surgery. But sometimes to get to the root of things, you have to just be okay with it. So once I made peace with being alone, the next step was to go inward, to lean into self-improvement, and do everything I could to regain power over my vices. Like I said earlier, vices can really be anything. The things that are preventing you from doing the inner work to change the root system that's preventing you from attracting quality people into your life. And it can seem super frustrating. And I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. This doesn't mean that you have to be unreasonably hard on yourself. Being tough on yourself to a point the way that a masculine, stoic, wise father would be. There's this higher part of your mind, soul, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, that you can tap into that calls you on your BS. It's trying to nudge you into a better direction. Learning to meditate, reading self-improvement books that really resonate with you, like resonate with your soul on a deep level. You'll know when you find them because you'll feel like you just want to underline every line in the book. If you're reading stuff and it doesn't keep your attention and it just doesn't resonate with you on a deep level, then maybe you need to find something else to read. I couldn't resonate with Stoic philosophy for a long time. I had to find other things to read that were a little bit easier to digest. And then years later, once I circled back to Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, I was able to absorb it once I was at that place. A book I would recommend starting with that honestly feels more like a spiritual or philosophical book, in spite of the title, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. From the first page of that book all the way to the last, I could feel my inner world being rewired by it. It was really impactful for me. And then at some point, if you really want to get crazy, after you spend time diving into meditation, I would research psilocybin and listen to some of Terrence McKenna's lectures. I didn't get into psychedelics until my early 30s, but when I did, it was from a place of intention, not taking it recreationally. It was strictly for uncovering the darker parts of my subconscious that I didn't realize was there. And once I went deep, I might never do it again. Or if I do, it might be years from now, because I did a really intense dose, found what I was looking for, and it helped me a lot. So that's not a path for everybody. It might be a path for you. Just research it when you're ready. So once you've taken this time, this substantial amount of time to be alone, to do like deep inner work, uncovering your demons, if you will, healing yourself, you naturally start to become a man who is more needed and less needy. Your outer value, your perceived value by the world naturally starts to increase. Chris Rock said in one of his comedies that only women, dogs, and children are loved unconditionally. And it's hilarious because I think there's some truth to it. Let me start off by saying, yes, we all have intrinsic worth just by existing and being human beings. The worth of your soul, if you will, is not in question. And that's what a lot of people tend to obsess over. The whole, you're worthy of love just for existing. That's true. But in the early stages, you have to give that love to yourself. The outer world, the external world is not just going to give that to you for existing, especially as a man. If you're not at a place yet where your gifts are developed enough to give back to the world in some way, shape, or form, then you're gonna have to cultivate that inner loving voice that sort of guides you through the process of developing into a man of value, okay? Again, not the worth of your soul, but perceived value from the external world. I'm telling you, the worst thing that I ever did was get hung up on, it's like, oh, well, pretty girls, they're just loved and valued just for existing. They didn't have to do anything. And it's like this whole spiral that keeps you in a victim mentality. If you can, just let that go. Because also when you work on yourself, you're building your skills, you're building competencies, and you just kind of feel yourself leveling up, it gives you this sense of purpose, and it makes being alone actually kind of enjoyable. And if you're not at a good place with much value to give, it can often feel like the world has turned its back on you. The world is like a form of unforgiving feminine energy. For instance, you're in a relationship with like a gorgeous feminine woman. I can almost guarantee you she's going to challenge you. She's going to test you from time to time to check and make sure that you're the man that she thinks and hopes that you are, or at least has the potential to be. And if you're not, she won't take you seriously. She might make your life a living hell. She sure as hell won't surrender to your frame. The world works the same way. You can say that it's harsh, but it's not anywhere near as harsh as it was thousands of years ago when humans were in tribes. If you weren't useful back then, you might get shunned or exiled from the tribe, and then your actual life, your physical life, was in danger from lack of food or shelter. So now there's a balance with being aware of this dynamic, but at the same time not having the unhealthy motivation of purely being obsessed with society thinks of you. It's more so the ability to zoom out, see things in humanity more holistically, the big picture of how everyone is connected. And over time, you just get this genuine desire to want to contribute to the whole of things, to the whole of humanity in your own unique and individual way. But you've got to be able to help yourself first. And then you'll get to a place where you can help others. And then those others, once they've been helped, will be able to help someone else, and the cycle continues. Good metaphor also is like when you're on a plane and they tell you, like, hey, if you've got children around, the oxygen masks drop, put yours on first. And they say that because if you're not okay, if you don't have yourself together, then you're gonna be useless to other people. You can help people from that place, but then it's this martyr mentality. And eventually you're gonna run out of steam and you won't be useful to anybody. Another key that was massively helpful to me was learning emotional regulation. At this point in my life, I'm probably the most stoic and emotionally regulated I've ever been in my entire life. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel deeply. I'm an artist in a few different ways, and allowing myself to be a little bit more on the sensitive side allows me to tap into something that can create art that resonates with the human experience a lot better. And you might be the same way. You might be a bit more on the sensitive side, and that's okay. But it's even more important for men like us to learn how to emotionally regulate, have emotional control. And when I say emotional control, what I really mean is control over your initial reaction to things. Getting to a place where you no longer just react out of emotion. In those moments, learning how to notice and create space inside of yourself to where you can choose what your response is going to be. Intentionally, calmly, wisely choosing your response. That is masculine. That is powerful. I first heard about this from Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was literally in a Nazi concentration camp. He called it the space between stimulus and response. And when I read that, I was like, man, if he could get to a place where he had that emotional regulation in hell on earth, then I definitely could too. So can you. Other people, especially women, can intuitively sense when you don't have a handle on your emotions. Sometimes it's unconscious. It's in the way that you carry yourself, the way that you speak, and just your overall presence. And let's face it, people don't feel like they can rely on a man if he's not emotionally and mentally strong. It tends to repel people. So first it starts with learning how to emotionally regulate by yourself, whether that's meditation, whether that's journaling. And eventually, if you get to a point where you have 1, 2, 3 male friends that you admire, trust, and they're also on a journey of improving themselves, you can confide in each other. And when you get that, it's a huge blessing. But step 1 is learning to do this by yourself. Become self-contained. That's where things like spirituality come in. If you believe in a higher power, even if you just believe in like a higher part of your consciousness or mind that lives within you, that you can quiet yourself, get into meditation and tap into that, and just sit with all of it. Face all of it. It's very easy to give into vices because this journey is not comfortable. A quick final thought with getting out of a season of loneliness, and I know this might seem like common sense, but just learning basic social skills. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, it stood the test of time for a reason. Everything that you need to learn like social skills, human psychology is in that book. If you've never read it, I highly recommend getting a hold of that. So that's it in a nutshell. Recognize the season of loneliness as a gift, because that's exactly what it is if it's used properly. I appreciate you watching. Watch this video next and keep pushing.